our aim is to be the first place that people come for kind of practical, simple advice on modern manufacturing. At the moment, the adoption program's available in the Northwest, the Northeast, Yorkshire, West Midlands and East Midlands, the 6 regions within England. But recently it was announced that there'll be a nationwide rollout over the next couple of years. There was a realisation that if you turn up with a robot and say, off you go and use that, the people on the shop floor that will be working with the robot are just going to say, well, no, I like how I'm doing it now. So there's a lot of work from a change management point of view, helping them understand the vision, why you need to do it, what their role's going to be like after adopting the technology, because that's often quite a key one. If they're skilled at a certain task, maybe welding or packaging or data analysis or whatever it might be, they're obviously going to wonder, well, what's my job going to entail now we've got software or a robot to do some of that work. So part of it is working through the process and the project and saying, right, it's going to automate this element of your task, but the rest of your job will be the more interesting welds, or you'll be able to engage with the customers more, or you'll be able to solve other problems and do more value-add tasks.
Welcome back to Made to Grow, the podcast custom made for SME manufacturers, brought to you by Flowlens MRP software. This episode, we're taking a deep dive into the world of digital transformation with Made Smarter, the government programme aimed at enabling UK SMEs to adopt digital technologies. And I'm talking with Will Kinghorn, who's a digital adoption specialist with the programme. Will outlines the aims of the regional programme, its successes in the north of England, and how manufacturers across the UK can benefit when the scheme is extended nationwide in the near future. We talk through examples of businesses that gained advice, funding and ongoing support in transforming their processes with digital technology through Made Smarter. And we talk about the ticking time bomb facing businesses that aren't moving forward while their competitors are. Let's jump right in. Okay, so greetings to Will Kinghorn, who is a manufacturing adoption specialist with Made Smarter UK. Thanks very much for joining us today, Will.
Nice to be here. Thank you, Rich.
So I see a lot of Made Smarter's activity on LinkedIn, but could you, before we get into that, could you sort of give our listeners an idea of your background and how you got into manufacturing?
Yeah, of course. So I'm one of the technology adoption specialists, and I'm also the robotics and automation specialist for Made Smarter in the Northwest. But I got into manufacturing because I studied product design and manufacturing at Loughborough University, and then moved on to I did a placement and the graduate scheme at Rolls-Royce, and kind of carried on within manufacturing there for the next sort of 12 years. And then I've been at Made Smarter for the last 3 years, working with smaller businesses, helping them with technology and kind of manufacturing techniques and things like that.
And at Rolls-Royce, where the technology adoption curve, I'm sure, was quite interesting to see a company of that size experimenting with things. Were you able to get your hands dirty at that early stage, and is that what kind of inspired you to help the SMEs?
Yeah. So obviously, that a company that size invests in very early stage technologies, kind of early readiness level, kind of fundamental science, all the way through to implementing that technology when it's much more mature and developed. So yeah, I got involved in quite a lot of those stages, from working with universities or research centres through to actually putting the technology on the shop floor and working with the teams in the factories to get it working and keep it running and optimize it. So yeah, I did get to see the full range of the kind of development cycle, I suppose. Yes, cool. It's good to kind of see that from an SME point of view. Just okay, not many of them work with universities on the early stage stuff, but it tends to be the more developed technology that we're trying to help them out with.
Mm-hmm. I have a couple of questions around that sort of adoption piece, which we'll come on to. But I suppose moving on to Made Smarter, can you give listeners just a flavour of exactly what Made Smarter does and where the support is available? Because I appreciate that it sort of varies across the UK.
Yeah, yeah. So Made Smart started as a pilot program in 2019 in the Northwest, and it came off the back of a government review into looking at why the UK doesn't adopt technologies at the rate other countries does. And the report found that it needs to focus on skills, innovation, leadership, and adoption within small and medium-sized companies. So if you look on the Made Smarter website, you'll see different programs aimed at those four aspects. And I'm from the Made Smarter Adoption Program, which helps SME manufacturers adopt technologies, and our aim is to be the first place that people come for kind of practical, simple advice on modern manufacturing. At the moment, it's the adoption programs available in the Northwest, the Northeast, Yorkshire, West Midlands, and East Midlands, so 6 regions within England. But recently it was announced that there'll be a nationwide rollout over the next couple of years. So even if you're not within one of those regions at the moment, it's worth keeping an eye on the website and kind of registering, because it will be coming to you in the next couple of years.
Excellent. So, sometimes when you talk about adoption with SMEs, the struggle is, where to start. And you mentioned skills gaps, and we find SMEs are just time poor. There's not a lot of time to work on the business because you're working in the business. Um, what kind of success stories are there to inspire companies to thinking about technology adoption, that it's worth the effort?
Yeah, so I think there's probably 3 examples that I use regularly in these kind of presentations. So if I kind of summarize them for you, and you can kind of pick into the details if you want to. So the first one was a company that makes pasta products for quite a niche market. They knew they needed to do something, but they didn't know what. So they came to us and said, "What do we do?" And so we helped them step by step look at the issues, and eventually they invested in some automation equipment, which was kind of a game changer for their production. So I like that one because they didn't know what to do, but they knew they needed to do something. We kind of helped them through step by step. The other side of that is we have a few companies that come along and say, well, we've got this quote for some software or some equipment. We know what we want to do. Can you help us with it? So we'll kind of validate that it's the right thing for them to do. And there's one particular company that invested in kind of industry specific software. And they said, right, we want to do phase 1 in the first 6 to 12 months, and we move to phase 2 on the production area after that. So we helped them with the grant application, and a month later they came back and said phase 1 went amazingly well. It was kind of, everyone's really engaged with it. It's worked really well. We want to do phase 2 straight away. Obviously, not every company has that level of success straight away, but it's quite good to see that it is possible and feasible for small companies that don't have that headroom in terms of time that you mentioned. And the last one's the people side of things. So we get quite a lot of companies that have key people in the business that we don't need to change. Our paper systems or the way we work at the moment is perfectly fine. And there are other people in the business saying, well, we need to grow, we need to embrace technologies to enable that growth. So that's where our kind of workforce development advisors come in and work with those people to help them along the journey with that change management and embrace it. So we've got some good examples where that's been successful as well.
That last point's particularly interesting because you kind of worry that good companies will get washed away, if you like, by the competitive strength of others who have adopted technology earlier. So, you know, I, I don't like to use the word laggards, but you could be 1 or 2 people in a business that are just content with the way things are, but actually they're potentially um, ticking time bombs, because by the time those people have moved on or changed their mind, the competitive landscape has changed and somebody's basically eaten their lunch. So maybe worth digging wee bit more into that about what do those workforce advisors actually do with the team to get the buy-in and get get people thinking from a different perspective?
Mm. So I think it started quite early on in the pilot. I think there was a realization that if you turn up with a robot and say, off you go and use that, the people on the shop floor that will be working with the robot are just going to say, well, no, I like how I'm doing it now. So there's a lot of work from a change management point of view, helping them understand the vision, why you need to do it, what their role is going to be like after adopting the technology, because that's often quite a key one. If they're skilled at a certain task, maybe welding or packaging or data analysis or whatever it might be, they're obviously going to wonder, well, what's my job going to entail now we've got software or a robot to do some of that work. So part of it is working through the process and the project and saying, right, it's going to automate this element of your task, but the rest of your job will be the more interesting welds, or you'll be able to engage with the customers more, or you'll be able to solve other problems and do more value add tasks. So a lot of it is in kind of talking them through what their concerns are, understanding what their role will be afterwards, and then kind of just getting them to engage with the process.
Mm-hmm. The Made to Grow podcast is brought to you by FlowLens, the simple, affordable MRP system specifically designed for SME device, equipment and machinery manufacturers. Our top-rated cloud-based software can help you cut down on wasted materials, time and money, and eliminate the chaos of running your manufacturing with spreadsheets and hope. Our customers have reported savings of over a day per week per person in their business by cutting out needless admin, duplication of work and countless mistakes. Plus, lead times are shortened by up to 75%. And after hundreds of successful implementations, we've got the blueprint for manufacturing success nailed down. Head over to flowlens.com for a quick video tour of the software and to hear from more manufacturers like you who have transformed their businesses with FlowLens. Now, back to the interview. That's helping them see how their life is going to be better. I was explaining this yesterday to a customer. That self-interest. Everyone's interested in self-preservation, but once you've got that bit, you're confident that your job's safe, and then actually this is going to make my life better. We see that ourselves. The penny drops with people who otherwise might be dragging their heels, and often they become the greatest advocates for the product as well, which is good. So how do you actually get started with a company that gets involved?
So once a company registers on the website, we'll have a quick call with them just to find out a bit more about them, what their ambitions are, what they want to do, make sure they're eligible for the process. But the main part is a workshop where we'll visit the site for a couple of hours. We'll talk to some members of the leadership team, some of the operators, look at each element of the business in terms of the product, what they make, how they sell it, how they make it, the people within the business, what their ambitions are in terms of do they want to grow or do they want to add new products or do they want to increase their exports, understanding what the challenges and what their ambitions are. And from that, we create them a digital transformation roadmap, which says these are the issues or these are your ambitions and these are the appropriate technologies for you in your industry. Because there's no point in us saying, well, have a look at 3D printing if you make curtains and there's nothing appropriate there for you to use it for. So we pick out the technologies which will have the biggest impact, and following on from that, we can kind of help them understand the requirements, introduce them to suppliers, and then take it from there to grant funding.
Excellent. And just to elaborate a wee bit more on the grant funding side of things, how does that work? So
we can apply for one grant per company, and it's up to £20,000 grant, and that's at a match funded basis. So if you've got a £40,000 project, you can apply for £20,000. So that's this kind of sweet spot. And the way it works is we help with the application form. It then goes to an independent panel, and we present to the panel on behalf of the company. And and they get a response on the day of the presentation whether or not it's been successful. So it's a relatively painless process. It takes probably 3 or 4 weeks all in all, because the panel need to have all the documentation a couple of weeks before to review it and things like that. But yeah, hopefully we've kind of simplified it as much as we can, while still doing the kind of due diligence of the process.
Well, like we deal with customers, we have customers that we've been working with for years, and those businesses evolve, their processes change, they enter new markets, their customer requirements evolve, their teams grow. So, and it's not just about providing more training, because as the business changes, the need for constantly reviewing processes and systems is there, not constantly but periodically. What kind of support can you give companies so that that digital journey and that evolution piece is maintained? Because you can set up a system today that mightn't be fit for purpose in 12 months' time.
So we're quite lucky in the fact that we're not restricted by the amount of hours that we can spend with a company. So even if a company's had a grant quite early on in their kind of journey with us, quite often they'll come back a few months later and say, well, can you help us with the people side, the workforce side? We have kind of fully funded training courses for leaders or kind of team leader level. So quite often companies will send people on that, and then send some other people on one of those courses and maintain that engagement. But also we quite often have companies coming back and say, well, we did a software project first, now we want to look at automation or 3D printing. Can you give us advice on how to approach that? And while we can't give a second grant at the moment, we can spend the time making sure the requirements are right, making sure that the proposals coming in are correct, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's quite a lot of work we can do to maintain that the kind of the development of the company.
Cool. The training courses sound like a good idea, because I think, again, I was having this conversation with a customer yesterday where they are, really trying to figure out who's the best person to run the next stage of their digital journey. The company's grown over the last couple of years, and the MD's kind of planning his succession. So he doesn't want to be the person driving it, and probably shouldn't be anyway. But then bringing somebody in to the business who doesn't understand it is fraught with risk, because without that understanding, you don't have credibility with the team. You won't have the authority to make changes, because it's going to take you 6 months to a year to understand how the business works. So those training courses sound like a really good idea to be able to upskill people that are already in the business and already understand the products and the customers and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that case, we have it's called the Leading Digital Transformation course that we, in the Northwest, we run it with Manchester Metropolitan University. So that's aimed at the leadership level of the business, to look at the kind of strategy elements of it, and how to kind of lead a digital project, and how to get it embedded within the company and make it successful. So in that case, that would be ideal for someone who's kind of within that succession planning zone, where they want to learn about the business but also develop their leadership skills before taking it on. So yeah, so that kind of training course would be ideal for them.
Yeah, no, that sounds perfect. Thinking back to what we were saying earlier, about those manufacturers who may be hesitant about taking the first step, what are the kind of blockers, do you think, today that are really getting in the way of people even starting on the journey?
There's an awful lot, unfortunately. I think there's an awareness of technology and how it can help companies. A lot of the companies a lot of the manufacturers in the UK are, or certainly the small and medium-sized ones, are niche manufacturers. So they do something very special, very unique. So they need a software solution or equipment which is suitable for them. So often they think, well, I'm doing this in a very special way, so there isn't going to be a machine that can do it for me, but actually we can help them find one that is, or develop one with an integrator that is. So obviously that awareness piece is a big one, but then you've got all the other issues around kind of supply chain disruption. You've got labour shortages, skill shortages, energy costs, raw material issues. That there's so many other issues going on in companies at the moment that looking at investing in new technology and learning about it is very difficult. And like you said earlier, these leaders are time poor, so that they're going to focus on the big issues and making sure the company can still operate, rather than spending their time learning about augmented reality and how it can help them.
It's sort of a frustrating chicken and egg situation.
Yes.
And the UK economy kind of needs a paradigm shift, but it's more of an incremental shift that, as we said earlier, some people might get left behind in the process. Well, it's great to know, more details about how you intervene with companies, because I think pure grant funding is great, but often I find companies don't necessarily value what they get for free or what they get subsidized, whereas actually the roadmap that you create with them is vital, because companies that we deal with in those early stages often haven't fully mapped out their processes. So having that roadmap and asking those questions at the get-go is really, really valuable and necessary.
Yeah, that's the feedback that we get, is while they signed up because they saw there was a grant available, it's the kind of the rest of the support we can offer from the technology side of things, from the work roadmap, and from the people development is the big thing. I think is they don't appreciate that all that support is there for them, and it's not just about the grant funding. So yeah, that's certainly the feedback we get from quite a lot of the companies we deal with.
Happy days. So how do people get in touch with you?
So the kind of standard answer would be sign up on the website, which is madesmarter.uk. You mentioned our LinkedIn page, which is Made Smarter UK on LinkedIn. We often have posts or case studies, or we do LinkedIn Lives where we focus on a specific area of technology and technology adoption each month. So that's a really good way of keeping in touch with the programme and finding out good case studies. And actually case studies on the website, they cover loads of different industries, loads of different technologies. So if you're in a particular industry and you want to find out examples of companies that we've worked with, the case studies is a really good starting point.
Cool. And there's also a database of solution providers like ourselves on there as well, which is good.
Yes, which is a good starting point as well, just to see just how many there are out there, rather than just going to one and taking the first answer. It's good to have a broader view and get a few different proposals and a few different discussions to make sure you're getting the right solution. So
what final thought would you leave listeners with regarding their digital transformation journey?
I think it is to get started. I think the advice we would give is technology pull. So have a look at the issues in your business and focus on the biggest ones, and then look for a solution for those big problems, and see if there are kind of technologies that can help with it. Obviously sign up to Made Smarter and we'll kind of help you along the way with it. But yeah, firstly it's look at your big issues and tackle those one by one.
100%. Makes total sense. Okay, well, appreciate your time and for those valuable insights. It was a great conversation. So I'll speak to you again soon.
Yep, thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks again to Will for his insights into digital transformation and the support that is out there for ambitious manufacturers. It's encouraging to see government engaging with the nitty-gritty of manufacturing growth and taking an individualised approach to support for small businesses. In our next episode, I'm talking with Sam Bainham from Connex Portal, a manufacturing networking group working to elevate manufacturing businesses across the UK through peer-to-peer networking and collaboration. We talk about the power of manufacturers working together and the challenges facing the sector now and in the coming years. If you find this episode useful, please consider subscribing and leaving a review on your podcast app of choice. Until the next episode, goodbye.